Hey guys, I'm Tim with BleepinJeep. Over the past week, I drove down to California to my friend's shop, Rock and Road Performance, and we made all sorts of modifications to Project Green Machine. Greg built some longer shackles for the rear, we added hydro assist steering, we added a locker, and we built this custom winch bumper completely from scratch. With all those modifications untested and less than 24 hours old, we then took this Jeep through the entirety of the Rubicon Trail. In today's video, we'll be sharing with you some tips and tricks that we applied while building this bumper that may help you with your fabrication projects at home. Alright guys, let's get to it. Hey guys, I just pulled into Rock and Road. Let me flip the camera around and show you. Check this out. Alright, here's a quick rundown of what's going on. The rough country winch has moved on. It still worked fine, but I'm going to be upgrading to a Warren Xeon, and we'll be building a bumper completely around the design and the concept of the Warren. So all that's coming off, and we'll be making something from scratch to replace it. Also adding hydro assist steering and a front locker. This is the front winch bumper coming together here on the front of Project Green Machine. And Greg is designing the skin, which is kind of the main outside profile here that'll wrap around to the edges. All this is coming out pretty cool, but let's go back here to the computer where Greg is coming up with this on the fly on CAD. And take a look at this design that he's coming up with right now. So that's going to be the front. You can see the slot where the fair lead will go. And then these holes that you see right down here, that allows for access to the winch from the bottom. And the main part of this bumper is going to be 3/16 that the winch is bolted to. And then we're going to make the skin out of 1/8 and add enough angles and stuff like that to try to get some rigidity out of it. So now that everything's in place and mocked up on the Jeep, we know that it all fits. We have a real snug fit around the winch, which is excellent. And at this point, we're ready to unbolt the bumper, take it off, and we can start welding it on the bench. Greg has a shipping scale here at the shop, and we'll put this on there to weigh it out of curiosity, maybe before and after weld, to see how much weld weight is added. But it is not that heavy. We went with 1/8 inch skins, we're calling it, these things here, and where the winch bolts down to and all the main structure is 3/16, which is plenty. But with the 1/8 inch added, where we don't necessarily need the strength, it actually makes for a relatively light bumper. And these are the factory three bumper holes on the XJ. That's as far back as the tie-ins need to go, in our opinion, on this bumper. And then on the unibody rails on the Jeep, I have some existing tie-ins, and those will be staying in place. You see them right here, and they go back about 12 inches or better. And so that bumper just mates up and welds right, or excuse me, bolts right there. All right, so Greg's here. He's going to talk a little bit about the weld process. and how if you're not a big company set up with jigs for reproducing bumpers like this in mass quantity, how to weld things and keep them pretty flat.
Yeah, because we are not a big company, we do a lot of one-off bumpers. We don't have a set jig. Normally you'd clamp something like this down so you can weld it out pretty quick, and it's going to minimize the amount of warpage because you got something else holding it rigid in place. But most people, they're going to be doing something like this in their garage. They're not going to have a jig. It's going to be freestanding like this where we can flip it over and flip it around. That's good because you can manipulate it and get it in a comfortable position so you can do some of these welds without being contorted or stuck in a jig. But it has a lot higher chance of warping and turning into a giant banana or something like that on you. So you really got to slow down and think about the welding process when you're putting something like this together to minimize warpage. We've done a bunch of bumpers like this, really wide, long ones, and have been able to keep them perfectly straight without getting all wild or anything. But we kind of limit our length of beads to about 4 inches, or if we have something like this, I would normally divide this in half. If it was something a little bit thicker, then I may weld this out in just one part.
And when you say weld this out, you're talking about between the corner and that little relief that holds everything together, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but in something like this, because it is smaller, I'll probably divide these in half and only weld half of it at a time. And I'll usually start from a middle and kind of work out. And I'll do 4-inch sections. If something is a little bit longer than 4 inches like this, I may do that in one little bead right there. But generally, I'll start from the middle and work out and kind of keep the beads symmetrical. If I'm not going to sand it down, it makes it look a lot better than just going random directions. Also, keeping consistent weld sizes makes everything look obviously like it was planned, because it was. But it makes it look more aesthetically pleasing if you're going to leave it raw, or if you're going to clear coat it or not sand it or anything. It makes it look symmetrical and clean. By welding only 4-inch pieces at a time, it doesn't build up a lot of excessive heat in the workpiece or in your bumper or whatever you're building. So it really minimizes the chances of warpage. What I normally like to do is just a couple 4-inch sections, either 1 on each side or 2 on each side, and then I walk away. You let the whole thing kind of cool down. That way it doesn't build up a lot of heat, doesn't warp. But if you only weld a couple small spots, when you walk away, it feels like it's going to take a long time to weld this thing out, but it doesn't actually take that long for it to cool back down. I usually walk away and I'll come back every 5-10 minutes or something, and I'll put my hands on it, and if I can hold my hands on the workpiece, then it's ready for another set of 4-inch beads. And that way, if I continue with that process, it may take the day to weld this whole bumper out, but it's going to be clean. It's going to be consistent. It's also going to be flat, and that's the most important part. You could rush through it, weld the whole thing out, but if your whole bumper looks like a banana at the end, it's not worth anything.
Greg uses Miller equipment at his shop. This is his MIG welder, and Greg has really become a master of MIG with this machine. You guys got to see these shackles that he built for my Jeep the other day. They're absolutely amazing, and the MIG welds that he produced using this equipment looks almost like it came off a TIG welder. I also brought my machine down, which is a Miller Multimatic 215. A few hours have passed since the last segment. I've been designing and adding in some ribbing, a little bit of web-like structure inside the bumper here. And I've done a few things. I'm going to have some hooks. I go right here, have them right over here. These hooks are left over from my 1990 Laredo Cherokee that I had in high school. I've had them for years. This is all that's left of the Jeep. They're going to go right here, and because these outer skin segments are just 1/8 inch, with the hook bolted down here, I've kind of boxed this in, reinforced it so with another layer 1/8, so it's a 1/4 inch thick underneath the hook. But I've also added this piece of webbing of 1/8 inch down to the main winch platform, which is 3/16, and that also connects to directly underneath another piece of 1/8, which ties into the front of the bumper, which is also 3/16. So for this hook to pull out or to rotate, it's really going to be quite an event for that to happen. Most of the force will be pulling front to back. I added all that webbing with the bumper clamped down to the table nice and flat And now we are finally ready to start welding this thing together. Another product from Miller we'll be taking a look at today is their new, well, it's not new actually, it's a Miller Elite helmet. These have been out for a while and they're very popular. A lot of guys really like these. What's new about this one is it has Miller's clear light technology, which is a new thing they've come up with the element in here, the lens. So I'm going to be welding with my speed glass, but what I'd like to do is try to strap this to the camera so that you guys actually get a chance to look through this helmet as I'm doing some of the welds here. So at this point, much of the inner structure of the bumper is all welded out, at least everything that I can reach in this position within reason. The bumper has been clamped down flat to the table for this entire process. The table also acts as a heat sink, which helps draw the heat away from the workpiece. And now I'm going to unclamp the bumper and start doing some of the finish welding on the outside. You can see right here, I did weld a little bit, and these welds are going to be real simple stringers that are easy for sanding. And like Greg mentioned earlier, I'm going to be doing the finish welds from the inside, working my way out in about 4-inch sections. And that way everything is distributed as evenly as possible. So I just finished welding the bumper. All the welds that you can see on the outside I did with the Miller Multimatic 215. These welds on the corner to corner joints here I made as smooth as possible, just real simple passes. That way they're easy to sand. And that'll be the next phase of this bumper, is showing you guys how to finish sand something using a 4.5-inch grinder with a flap disc and a DA sander. So one thing that I've found important for sanding a bumper is the direction of the flap disc. As you see, most of them spin clockwise if you're looking down on it. So what I would not want to do is stand on this side and sand into it with the flap disc spinning this way, because that's going to tend to round that corner adversely or in a way that I don't want. But when I sand this way, I'm able to keep the flap disc on plane with the surface and just take off that lip and gently work this back and forth. And I want to be careful not to sand like this, and absolutely I don't want to be at too sharp of an angle this way. So we're just going to stay nice and gentle and as flat as possible. Once you have the weld sanded on plane with both surfaces, this surface as well as this surface, then I start taking the grinder and always keeping it flat, start moving back and forth as far as you can per pass, and start rotating the grinder down the side like that as you go back and forth to create a nice smooth radius. So at this point I've sanded as much as I need to with the angle grinder, and to really finish this thing up nice I'm going to come back with the DA and follow all these contours. Realistically at this point you could paint it, but this just takes it to the next level. Once I had everything sanded to my liking, I wiped the bumper down with some denatured alcohol. Anything you want to use probably work fine. Acetone, lacquer thinner, just something that cleans the metal, rids it of grease, but also doesn't leave a residue. I tend to use denatured alcohol the most. After that, I hung the bumper up and hit it with some spray paint. After the paint was dry, we bolted it onto the Jeep and we headed to the trail. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned anything, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot, and if you're interested in supporting us further, please check out the Patreon link in the description below, and we'll see you in the next video.